Have you ever heard a story so real, so disturbingly human, that it forces you to look over your shoulder, even when you know you're alone? Tonight I'm taking you to a place that shouldn't exist. A place where hundreds of dull bodies hang from trees like silent witnesses. A place where the air feels heavy, not because of the humidity, but because of something else, something watching you. This is Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls. A place built not out of art, but out of fear. And trust me, once you hear what really happened there, you'll never look at a doll the same way again. All right, breathe in. Let's step back, slowly, into the swamps of Xochimilco, Mexico. A quiet, beautiful maze of canals that feels frozen in time. Families go there for boat rides, music, and flowers. But venture far enough into the wetlands, and the festive atmosphere fades into stillness. The water darkens, the birds go quiet, and suddenly, you see them. Dozens of dolls hanging from trees, some missing eyes, some with cracked porcelain skin, some smiling, but not in a way that feels friendly. To most tourists, it looks like a horror movie set. To the locals, it's a cursed island. To the man who lived there, it was a shrine. And to the spirit he believed haunted him, it was an offering. Let us start with the man at the center of all of this, Don Julian Santana Barrera, a quiet man, a loner, someone who didn't talk much. But when he did, people listened. He wasn't evil, he wasn't crazy, he was just different. Someone who felt things deeper than most people. He moved to the island in the 1950s, looking for peace. But instead of peace, he found a nightmare wrapped in tragedy. According to Don Julian, one day a little girl drowned in the canal near his home. He said he saw her body floating, helpless, still. No one knows her name. No family ever came forward. No official reports were filed. But Don Julian believed her. He believed her spirit never left. And this is where the emotional connection slams hard into the story, because whether or not the girl truly existed, Don Julian believed he failed her. He believed he was the only witness to her last moment, the only adult close enough to save her, and he didn't. His guilt became the first ghost on the island. A few days after the drowning, Don Julian said he heard whispers near the water, soft, childlike, calling out, sometimes crying. He said he felt a presence watching him at night, not evil, but sad, like a child wanting attention. Then one morning, he found a doll drifting in the water. A small, waterlogged thing missing an arm, hair tangled like seaweed. Most people would throw it away, but Don Julian picked it up carefully, like it was alive. He hung it on a tree. He said it was to appease the little girl's spirit, a gift, an apology, a way to tell her, you're not alone anymore. This is where authenticity kicks in, because this isn't fantasy. This actually happened. People who visited him back then remember seeing the first doll hanging on the branch. One doll. Just one. That's how the obsession began. People always assumed the dolls came all at once. They didn't. It took years. Don Julian collected dolls from garbage piles, canals, markets, anywhere he could find them. Not to make art, not to decorate. To him, each doll was a soul, a presence, a way to keep the girl calm. But here's where the psychological depth strikes hard, because guilt does strange things to the human mind. It makes you see meaning in accidents, patterns in randomness. And for Don Julian, the island became his entire world. A world where he wasn't alone, but constantly observed by hundreds of unblinking eyes. Visitors described him as kind, but strange. He'd tell everyone the same thing. She wants more dolls, more offerings, more eyes watching the canal so she won't feel abandoned again. Now here's where the moral ambiguity kicks in. People still argue today. Was he protecting the girl's spirit? or feeding his own guilt-driven delusions? Was he a guardian, or a prisoner of his own mind? There's no clean answer. And that's what makes this story so unforgettable. As the number of dolls grew, so did the island's atmosphere. At first, it looked quirky, strange, like folk art. But then the dolls started to rot. Limbs fell off. Plastic melted under the sun. Porcelain faces cracked. Eyes clouded over with mold. Hair stiffened with dirt. At night, the wind blew through the hollow heads, making eerie whistles. Visitors claimed they heard whispers, giggles, rustling footsteps. Some said the dolls moved their heads. Others swore the eyes followed them. Don Julian, he believed every word of it. He said the dolls weren't just offerings anymore. They were protectors, and each one had a spirit inside. But here's the twist. Sometimes he said those spirits were friendly. Other times, he said they were angry. Angry at him. Angry at the world. Angry at anyone who dared visit the island. And this fear wasn't theatrical. People close to him, said Don Julian, truly believed he was dealing with real souls. This is the moment where the story shifts from eerie to downright chilling, because whether the spirits were real or not, Don Julian's fear was real. And real fear is more frightening than any ghost. In the last decade of his life, Don Julian became more withdrawn. He rarely left the island. He barely spoke to visitors. His nephew said he began acting paranoid, talking about the girl more often, saying she was getting stronger, more demanding. He claimed he saw her standing near the trees at night, watching the dolls, watching him tilt. Sometimes he'd wake up crying, saying she whispered, "You didn't save me." And here's where the curiosity builds, because every time Don Julian said this, he added something new, a detail he hadn't mentioned before, something darker, something that made everyone wonder. Was Don Julian remembering, or imagining? Was the girl's spirit truly speaking? Or was his guilt shaping his reality? People still debate that today. Before we continue, I want you to imagine something. You're standing on that island. Just you, the trees, and hundreds of dolls staring at you from every direction. Their bodies sway. Their heads tilt. Their wet hair sticks together like tangled roots. Now imagine hearing a splash in the canal behind Uslo, deliberate, like someone small just stepped into the water. You turn around, but there's no one there. This is the moment Don Julian lived with every single day. And what happened next to him is one of the most shocking twists in any real haunting story I've ever told. Let's go deeper. Welcome back to the island. We're still in the middle of Exocamilco's dark canals, surrounded by tangled branches that block the sunlight and water so still it looks like black glass. In part 1, we talked about how Don Julian started collecting dolls to appease a girl's restless spirit, a spirit he believed drowned right next to his home. But here, in part 2, we're entering the period where things stopped being strange and started becoming dangerous. This is when reality and superstition folded into each other so tightly it became almost impossible to tell them apart. Visitors who came to the island in the late 80s and early 90s all reported the same thing. Don Julian wasn't the same man anymore. He looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept in years, like someone always listening for something. He'd stare into the water for long minutes without blinking. Some said he'd mutter to himself. Others said he'd whisper as if talking to an invisible child. Was he communicating with a dead girl? Or was he talking to his own guilt, echoing back at him? That's the emotional tragedy buried in this whole story, because whether or not the ghost was real, his fear was real, his loneliness was real, and his obsession was painfully human. He once told a visitor, "She walks here at night. She stands by the water. She wants company." so I give her dolls. Imagine believing that, truly believing it, for decades. As Don Julian's obsession deepened, his stories became more intense. He said he heard crying at 3 a.m. He said he heard footsteps of a child running across the deck. He said he felt small fingers tugging at his shirt while he slept. One night he claimed he heard a voice whisper right next to his ear, "Another one. Bring me another one." And here's the terrifying psychological layer, because he didn't hear it once. He heard it over and over again, like a broken record in his mind. He believed the girl wasn't grateful anymore. She was demanding, growing, strong enough to influence reality. Visitors confirmed that he became tense whenever the wind blew, whenever the dolls clacked against one another, whenever water rippled without explanation. He'd freeze, stare, wait, like he expected something to crawl out of the canal. People often imagine ghosts as villains, but in this story, who is the victim really? Dead girl or Don Julian? This is where moral ambiguity becomes painfully sharp. Some locals said he was cursed. Some said he was chosen. Some said he was simply haunted by his own regret. One neighbor once said, "The island didn't have a ghost. The island made a ghost," meaning Don Julian, through isolation and fear, created a haunting so vivid, so emotionally charged, it became real to him. And honestly, that might be the most terrifying kind of haunting, the one born in your own mind. Now we reach the turning point. The moment the legend became something darker. It was the early 2000s. Don Julian was old, moving slower, talking less. His nephew, Anastasio, visited him often. He said Don Julian kept repeating the same thing for weeks. "She wants me. She's calling me from the water." He said the girl's spirit was becoming impatient, that she didn't just want dolls anymore, she wanted him. And then, one day, something unbelievable happened. Don Julian found another doll floating in the canal. But this doll was different. It looked new, perfectly dry, perfectly intact, and there was no one nearby. He picked it up like it was a sign, like the girl herself left it there for him. His nephew, said Don Julian, looked terrified and fascinated at the same time. He whispered, "She's back." This wasn't just guilt anymore. This was full surrender to the haunting. In the last week of his life, Don Julian told his nephew something chilling. "She told me she's lonely. She told me someone will join her soon. Someone close." His nephew asked, "Do you mean me, Ka?" But Don Julian shook his head. "No," he said. "She wants me." This wasn't the rambling of a man losing his mind. His nephew described him as clear, calm, almost resigned, like someone who knew what was coming. And this is where unexpected twists slam into the story, because nobody expected what happened next. One morning in 2001, Anastasio arrived to find his uncle missing. He called out for him. No answer. He walked around the island. Nothing. Then he went to the canal and froze. Don Julian's hat was floating in the water, and beneath it was his body. He drowned, in the exact same spot where he always said the little girl had drowned. The twist. Don Julian was an experienced swimmer. He knew those waters better than anyone. He lived there nearly 50 years. So how does a man like that drown in calm water only a few feet deep? Some say it was an accident. Some say it was his heart. Some say he slipped. But locals, they whisper something else, that the girl finally took him. That the haunting ended the way he always feared it would. That the island claimed the man who devoted his life to it. That he joined her. After his death, something shifted. Visitors said the island felt heavier, darker, as if Don Julian's spirit lingered alongside the girl's. Some swear they saw a figure walking between the trees. Some said they heard a man, ese voice, whisper, "No más," "No miss," which means no more, no more. Others said the dolls moved more often than before. Locals began calling it a double haunting the girl and the man bound together forever. Is it real? Is it psychological suggestion? Is it trauma echoing through the people who loved him? No one knows, but every theory is disturbing in its own way. Before we finish this story, let me ask you something simple, but unsettling. If a place absorbs enough fear, enough grief, and enough obsession, does it become alive? I'm not talking about ghosts. I'm talking about the land itself, the trees, the soil. The dolls stew because after Don Julian died, people who stepped onto Isla de las Muñecas began reporting something different. Not just whispers, not just movement in the dolls, but an atmosphere so heavy you feel it pressing against your lungs like someone is standing behind you, watching, waiting. And many believe that someone isn't the little girl anymore. Let's step onto the island one last time. The island today looks almost the same as it did when Don Julian died. The same sagging wooden house, the same collapsed shed, the same trees with hundreds of dolls hanging like forgotten memories. Only now, dolls look older, weather-beaten, deformed, blackened by mold and age. Tourists go there expecting a creepy attraction, a weird Instagram spot. But the second you step off the boat, you understand why locals refuse to visit after sunset. The silence is unnatural. The wind feels colder. The dolls creak like they're whispering to each other. And the moment you realize you're surrounded by hundreds of cracked, staring faces, all turned toward the center of the island, you feel something primal. You are not alone, not here, not on this island, not with them watching. After Don Julian's death, word spread quickly. Some said his spirit lingered to continue protecting the girl. Others claimed he became restless angry, even because no one understood the burden he carried. A boat operator named Miguel shared a chilling experience. He said he was tying his boat to the dock when he heard footsteps behind him, heavy, adult footsteps. When he turned around, nobody was there but the dolls. All their heads were turned toward the spot where he'd been standing. Every single one. He refused to return to the island alone again. Was it psychological suggestion? Maybe. But then came another witness, a woman named Teresa, who felt a small hand tug her skirt. When she looked down, she saw nothing, but she heard a giggle faint, distant, coming from the trees. Two presences, two different energies. The girl and the man, both still there, both still reaching for the living. This is where emotional connection hits the hardest, because the scariest part of Isla de las Muñecas, Ice and Tea, the ghosts sit the humanity behind them. A lonely girl who died unnamed. A lonely man who spent his life trying to ease her suffering, and maybe his own. People visiting the island often report feeling a sudden wave of sadness, or guilt, or longing, like emotions soaked into the soil and passed into anyone who steps onto it. Some say it's spiritual. Some say it's psychological contagion. Some say it's empathy echoing across decades. But almost everyone agrees. You don't leave that island the same. There are dozens of stories about people who mocked the island only to experience terrifying consequences. One tourist laughed at the dolls and kicked one of them down. On his way back, he slipped on the boat deck and broke his ankle in 3 places. Another visitor challenged the ghost aloud, saying, "Show yourself if you're real." That night, she woke up in her hotel room, covered in mud from the canal. No memory, no explanation. Was it coincidence, sleepwalking, or something else? Every time people try to disrespect the island, something weird happens. Even the boat operators warn tourists, don't touch the dolls, don't insult them, never take one home, because if you do, the island might follow you. Here's where the story becomes morally complex, and honestly, This is one of the reasons Isla de las Muñecas haunts people so deeply. Was Don Julian a hero, a protector, a man who dedicated his life to honoring a forgotten girl? Or was he a troubled soul who projected his fears onto an island and unintentionally created a place of darkness? Was he saving the girl, or imprisoning her spirit? Was he fighting a haunting, or feeding one? There's no clear answer. That's the beauty and horror of true stories. They don't give you a villain. They don't give you a hero. They just give you humans flawed, scared, emotional humans doing the best they can in impossible situations. Many visitors say they don't feel the girl. They feel him. A heavy male presence. A sadness that wraps around you like a wet blanket. A feeling of being observed from a distance, like someone is watching to see if you respect the island the way he did. Some psychics who visited claimed Don Julian didn't he move on, that he's trapped not by the girl, but by the dolls. Every doll he hung became a chain made of fear, of guilt, of devotion, of obsession. And now he wanders the island, tangled in the memory of a little girl he could never save. That's not horror, that's heartbreak. Here's something not everyone knows. Almost exactly 50 years after Don Julian claimed the girl drowned, a young boy drowned on the same island. Same location, same shallow water, same eerie silence. Locals whispered that the girl took him. Others said Don Julian did that. His spirit was repeating its own tragedy. But the most disturbing theory, that the island itself needs witnesses. It needs tragedy. It needs stories. Because stories are how places stay alive. Whether you believe the ghosts or not, the pattern is undeniable. And that is the scariest twist of all, because it suggests this haunting didn't start with the girl. Didn't start with Don Julian. It started with the island. So now, imagine you're standing at the edge of the dock, ready to leave. The boat is waiting. The water is unnaturally still. The dolls sway in the wind like 100 tired souls saying goodbye. You step onto the boat. But before you go, you take one last look at the island. And you swear for a split second one of the dolls turns its head toward you. You blink. It's still again. The boat pulls away. The island shrinks behind you, but the feeling doesn't fade. You still feel those eyes. You still feel that presence. You still feel that sadness. Because Isla de las Muñecas is not just a haunted place. It's a story about love twisted into fear. About guilt turned into obsession. About a man who tried to fix the past and paid with his future. And somewhere out there, in the dark canals of Xochimilco, the dolls are still waiting, watching, listening, remembering, and maybe, just maybe, calling your name